Hello and welcome to World Cup Day 10 and my thoughts on the games today and everything else that's happened. So today we had the final games in Group A and Group B, and it was a pretty good day, quite an interesting day actually in terms of those games. I think Group B pretty much turned out exactly as a lot of people thought it would, barring a few kind of bumps along the road. And Group A had a very interesting twist towards the end, where Senegal beating Ecuador, which is against a lot of people's predictions before that game. So to start with, I'm going to talk about Group B and the England-Wales game and just go from that. We watched that live all the way through, and it's definitely one of the games I've paid most attention to for the last little while. I think the thing is, and I said this yesterday, just as a general point, England will score goals against Wales, and I was kind of hoping that this wouldn't kind of come back to bite me in the backside saying that. That wasn't the case. England did really well in the second half, scored 3 goals, ran away with the game. It was looking like England were kind of struggling a little bit in the first half to create chances. But at the same time, it was very different to the US game, where I think the US they kind of realised that England weren't as threatening as they thought they were, and they started to take control of the game themselves. Wales were never, ever going to do that in this game. They don't have the ability to take control of a game like that against a team like England, purely because the technical quality they have at the back and the midfield is not good enough. Joe Allen's probably their best passer in the team, and that's only one of them. And then I don't think the other player, the wingers especially, aren't particularly good at keeping the ball. Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey don't have the same legs that they had before. So yeah, England probably definitely deserved to win, but I do think it was quite an easy game for them in a way. Talking again about the differences between the two teams and how Wales have kind of gone downwards since the 2016 Euros, and England have gone up since then considerably. And they're kind of at opposite ends now of the kind of tournament spectrum, as it were. I would be kind of surprised if Wales qualify for the next Euros. I've got to say they should do, really. I was like looking at how easy the qualification is for the Euros these days. It's a 2014 tournament, so I think there might be 32 now actually. But they've basically got so many teams at that Euros now that a lot of teams could probably consider themselves within a good shot of qualifying. Even Scotland, Northern Ireland could seriously consider actually qualifying, whereas before, when it was 16 teams, it was like a bit of pie in the sky dream really to be able to qualify for those, I think. So as far as England are concerned, obviously Marcus Rashford scoring a fantastic free kick from outside the box, and then followed that up with a nice little bit of play off the right hand side where he actually shot with his left foot, and it was a bit fortunate because it goes through defender's legs and then off Danny Ward's foot into the goal and through his legs as well. But the fact that if Rashford could start shooting with his left foot as well as his right, and that would make him a really dangerous threat wherever he plays, right or left. And I think that's something that he's definitely clearly improved in his game, his shooting. He's kind of placing shots a bit more often now. And that's really very impressive, I think, for a guy who was having so much stick about a year ago for Man United and just not playing that well. Obviously missed the penalty in the Euros. I think he's come back really, really well. And there's a lot of plaudits that need to go to this England team purely on attitude and resilience and being able to come back from those setbacks. And they've done really well. Harry Maguire's another one. Don't think he was really tested that much today, to be fair. But he's played well in all 3 games, and he's done really well. I do think it helps that England, they're not asking him to kind of play a high line and press too much. I think they're letting him kind of sit back and defend in his own kind of third, as it were. There was a moment where he was chasing back a player running in behind him. I think it might have been Brendan Johnson, I can't remember. He didn't do very well in that moment. He was definitely caught and made the foul, and tried to claim that the other player had brought him down, but he definitely made the foul there. And the other player to mention, was Phil Foden, who scored the second goal. He won, in inverted commas, the foul for Rashford's free kick, the first goal, and I do think that Wales have got a lot of right to be aggrieved for that goal and how that happened, because to be honest, they did not deserve that free kick. I don't think England, they shouldn't have got it really. It was a dive. If you look at the replays, he barely makes any contact. And in this World Cup, where we're expecting a lot of physical challenges, free kicks and the bar for free kicks is quite high in this World Cup, I think. To see a free kick given for that is quite surprising, to be fair, and not really in keeping with the rest of the World Cup. Obviously, as an England fan, I take it, but I do think that they're quite fortunate with that one. And then Foden scored the second goal, which was just some horrible play from Wales. They were in the game still at 1-0, but then they try and play the ball out from the back in their left back slot and give the ball away. And Harry Kane gets it and then whips it across the box, and it's an open goal for Foden. I've got to say, I mean, Foden's a good player, don't get me wrong. I think he plays better in the kind of 10 role. I think a player like him should be playing in the 10 role, or possibly left wing. It's where he plays for Man City quite often, is on the left wing. For England, I would have him playing as a 10, because his vision of passing and his range and his ability to carry the ball in midfield is really, really good. It's probably the best. It's right up there with one of the best ball carriers in this team. I don't know why we decided to rest Saka though. And again, I'm an Arsenal fan. Yes, hands up. Fine, I'm slightly biased, but England should be playing Saka every game. We are threatening every time he plays. He played, and whenever we're doing something good, usually Saka's on the pitch. Today was probably one of the first times I watched an England team play, and we scored a few goals, and he wasn't on the pitch. That's the first time in a long time that I could say that. So Foden played pretty well. Would I expect him to play in the next game? Probably, I think. But again, I think me and Gareth Southgate have very different views of how we set up an England team. So they're usually quite stubborn and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Defensive, which is why Henderson was playing in the midfield alongside Rice and Bellingham. And I'm not a fan of that either. I think, again, this is where I think Foden could come in and play the Henderson role. And yes, he can work, as long as he's working back, and that's the main thing. He's got to be working back a bit more. But generally speaking, he's so good on the ball, and we do dominate the ball against teams like this. You've got to take advantage of that and look at what Spain do. They played with basically two number 10s, and with Pedri and Gavi, and they dominate games, and they look so threatening going forward. England don't necessarily have that, and I think that's partly because they don't give the team the platform. Excuse me. England don't necessarily have that because they don't give the team the platform to be able to go and attack teams with their players. I think that's the main thing. So, as far as Wales are concerned, it's the end of the road for them. I think it really is. I think they've got a long way to come back. I'm not expecting players like Bale and Ramsey to play in the Euros in 2 years' time, assuming they qualify. And they've got to start moving on from that now, I think, because otherwise they're just going to keep facing embarrassments like this. So they would have been expecting to qualify from this group, given that I think they definitely don't think they're better than England, but I think they would think they were as good as, if not better than, Iran and the US. Obviously, that's what they thought going into it. I actually disagree. I think Wales were the worst team in this group, and by quite a distance as well. They just don't have attacking threat. If you think about it, the only goal they scored was that penalty that Gareth Bale won, and he did win it, so it was a penalty, but it was a very deliberately won penalty. This Wales team don't possess a goal threat, and that, I think, if you look at all the teams that are doing really well in this tournament, they all possess a goal threat. And Wales just don't. And I do think they're going to have to completely reinvent themselves for the next tournament and the next qualifying stages, which happen in March. it's difficult to see how they're going to do that though, because I think their best player, young up and coming player, is Brennan Johnson, and he barely played in this tournament. I'm really surprised that he didn't start the game against England, because his threat in behind would have been scary for England to deal with. And the other games as well, same thing. US would have been really good to see him starting, and Iran, same thing. Iran, he would have probably given a few other players a kick up the backside, to be honest, and stop them from kind of relaxing too much into their shape. So that was Wales. We're saying goodbye to Wales. We're saying goodbye to Iran as well, who lost to the USA 1-0. Were kind of, I think they were deserved losers. The way that the US played, they certainly earned their goal. They seemed to be dominating play all the way through this game. Not all the way through, sorry, in the first half, right up until they scored. And then after that, it was very much, I think the game state defined how the game went after that. And that meant that US were defending a lot more. But that's not because they were the worst teams, because the game state basically decided that's what was going to happen. And when we want to say game state, I mean, if a game is 1-0 to one team, the team who's winning 1-0 would most likely be defending that lead and then playing on the counter-attack. That's what happens at most kind of top-level football. And in this case, the US are winning 1-0. To say that Iran were better because they attacked more in the second half is not true, because it's up to them then to respond and score, and they didn't in the end. It's the hard fact of it. There was some weird stuff going on in that game, I've got to say as well. Towards the end, I basically switched over to the other game because England-Wales, I think, was 3-0 by about 60 minutes in. So after about 70 minutes, I switched over, and there was some weird diving going on in the Iran team. They were just so desperate, to the point where balls were being flung into the box, and then Iranian players would just fall over the minute they got to the ball. They would just fall over. It was like a premeditated decision that they were going to fall over to win a penalty rather than try and win the ball. And there was one moment actually when an Iranian player got in on goal, 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper, and just decided to fall over because he felt a bit of pressure from behind him for a penalty. And I just think that's the football players these days, and we are moving away from this now. There are some players I'm thinking of. Actually, Phil Foden, I think, is one of them. Bukayo Saka is another one. I'm trying to think of other England players that do this. I think Rashford maybe as well, where they will, if they are fouled or if they are touched, they will kind of carry on. Obviously, I think the Foden one, actually, when he won the free kick, was obviously not the case. But generally speaking, they will try and beat players and not try and buy fouls, because they know there's more advantage in taking advantage of a team that's not set up at that point to defend you because you've beaten a man. And Iran just probably weren't capable of that, but also B, I think they were extremely desperate at that point to try and get a goal, and they thought the best way to do that was a penalty. I completely disagree. And it was weird because he was in on goal. If he got a better touch on that, he could have gone through the goalkeeper's legs and in. And that would have been 1-1 and Iran would have been through as well. That's the difference that goal made in the game. So in the end, I think game state almost dictated that the US would end up winning that game, because they were the team who had to go and win, and the Iran only needed to draw. And in the end, I think that's how it was, although the US did. I'm not taking anything away from them, because they deserved to win that game, hands down. So looking forward then, before I do look forward, I just want to cover the Group A fixtures that happened earlier in the day. So we had two games. We had Senegal playing Ecuador, and the Netherlands taking on Qatar. Netherlands-Qatar is a pretty easy to sum up. I think it finished 2-0, probably should have been 3-0 if the laws were applied correctly. Again, by the way, the second time this World Cup, the laws haven't been applied correctly to a handball decision. It's just ridiculous. As far as I'm aware, anyway, I'm not sure, but it's very strange. So we'll talk about that first. So Gakpo scores from a really nice move, actually, getting him cutting in from the left, and then shooting with his right foot into the bottom corner. Pretty easy goal, but I think a lot of what the Netherlands were doing was like, yeah, we'll score, but we're not going to try too hard. And then De Jong followed up on Memphis's shot to make it 2-0, and then the Netherlands break the offside trap to make it 3-0. But during that break, the ball flicks off of Gakpo's left arm, and the handball rule says it's not handball unless the ball has hit the arm of the person who goes on to score. And that's when VAR can intervene. And that wasn't the case. Gakpo wasn't the one who scored. He went on. The play went on several passes before ended up going in. I do not understand where the handball law is. And someone correct me if they think I'm wrong, but like they should have been 3-0 up in that game. It just concerns me that we're starting to see, that's twice in 2 days, where the handball law hasn't been applied correctly. And if this continues later into the tournament, what have we got? What have we got left? Are we going to have a game in the semi-final which is decided by a handball decision that's wrong? Because I think there's a difference between like subjective, like yes or maybe no, maybe yes choice, like how, like whether you're giving a penalty or not sometimes. But with this, like this is handball, it's like it's clear, very, very clear as far as if you put your hand behind you to support you when you're falling, that's not handball. They gave a handball. If you make a handball in the build-up of the play, but you're not the one who scores, it's not handball. They give handball. It's very weird that these referees don't know the rules of the game. Very, very strange. So that was that game. That was over. Obviously, I think 1-0 was enough really for Qatar. Never looked like scoring. Qatar, just a quick note on Qatar. They are the worst team to ever have hosted a tournament. So they're the worst performing hosts of a tournament. So no team has ever hosted the tournament and lost all 3 games. They've only scored 1 goal, which I believe is the worst hosts as well. Should we be very surprised? No. Should we have expectations of them doing better? No, I don't think so. I think it would be a bit like saying to Scotland playing in a World Cup, can you like maybe get a point? Because like Scotland have a much better footballing heritage, but I don't think Qatar's population is that much bigger or smaller than Scotland's, as far as I'm aware. I might be wrong. It might be a bit bigger in Scotland, but it's so small, and most of the population in Qatar is made up of migrant workers who won't even be playing football. So if you're talking about the football playing population, it'd be really small. And yes, they've tried to kind of build it with the Aspire Academy and trying to naturalise players into Qatari citizenship, but there's only so far you can go with that. I think you've got to eventually good coaching and good kind of building up of resources. I think that'll be the thing that will get a country going in terms of good football. But I mean, there's a reason why Russia, for example, are like a very, very good footballing team almost all the time, really. And it's nothing to do with kind of amazing coaching. It's just their sheer population size. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with Qatar. I think it's obviously a shame to lose a host in a World Cup, but to be honest, I don't think we're going to miss much from these hosts, because it doesn't feel, those games that Qatar were in felt quite lifeless. It felt like there wasn't much in the way of an atmosphere in any of those games, and I think that's partly because it was quite manufactured. If you saw the Qatar fans and the way they celebrate, it was like, yeah, that's clearly a bit too manufactured for my taste, let's put it that way. Whereas you see other hosts in the past, South Africa, who were just happy to have it there. They were amazing all the way through that tournament. And it didn't seem to matter if South Africa were playing, by the way, as well. They went out in the group stages as well, and they didn't mind going out to an extent because their presence was felt in every other game that was played in that tournament. Brazil, same thing. Obviously, we saw them go quite far, but that's a completely different prospect because they're a massive footballing nation. and then Russia in 2018. But Russia actually played really well in that tournament and have got quite far. So I think it's a tricky balance to kind of strike with this Qatar team, because yes, I wouldn't say they've underperformed, but it's not great for them. But at the same time, I don't think anyone realistically would be expecting Qatar to get a point out of any of those 3 games. So going forward, they'll have to try and build themselves up as a footballing nation if that's what they want to do. But it'll take a long time. It'll take a really long time. As far as Netherlands are concerned, very accomplished performance, nothing less than we'd expect. And they play the US in the next round. It's a difficult game for them. The US are quite an athletic team. I don't think it's going to be a given that the Netherlands win this game. I think the US have got a really good chance of winning. We'll have to wait and see, but I think their capacity to get from defence to attack really quickly is a massive threat to this Netherlands team, because they love to keep the ball, control the game through possession, and then play their way through the thirds and eventually score from that. But if they lose the ball in a kind of midfield or even an attacking position, you can bet there'll be US runners going the other way, and the Netherlands defenders will have the biggest test they've had so far in terms of defending. I think they will have. Virgil van Dijk's going to be key in that game as well. Actually, if he plays well, I think the Netherlands probably win. But if he doesn't have a good game, then they could have problems. Definitely. Okay, moving on to another game. Ecuador against Senegal. A lot of people saw this, and I saw this right at the start of this group. I'm like, yep, this is going to be the game that decides who finishes second. And Senegal ended up winning, but Senegal went ahead from a penalty, which was an awful challenge. An absolutely terrible challenge in the box. It was just such an obvious penalty. And to the point where the Senegal player, I think it was Sarr actually, was fouled, and he just could not get out of the way. We talked earlier about how some players now prefer to get out of the way of a challenge to then go on and score, rather than get in the way of a challenge and actually get fouled and get a free kick or a penalty. Sarr had no choice. He was getting taken out regardless. So it was really well finished by Sarr. Bit of Premier League quality there. Really surprised he's not playing in the Premier League yet, actually. He should be. But then, so Senegal held that lead out till half time, then the second half, and Ecuador equalised out of the blue, really, from a corner, and it's kind of flicked on, and then Caicedo scores from close range to score that one. And at that point, you're thinking, right, this is game on now. This is a really, really, really exciting last half an hour, 25 minutes. But then Koulibaly scores on the volley from a free kick. Another bit of shocking defending where the ball goes in the box, and for some reason Ecuador players just don't clear it. And it's weird to watch, because this team played really well over the first 2 games, and they did defend very well for both of those games. This one, they've thrown everything out. They've been rubbish. Such a massive mistake for that goal, and that's what's cost them going through in the end. It kind of rebounds off of an Ecuador player in the box, lands to Koulibaly, who hits it in with the volley. But goodness me, when I saw it in real time, I thought, surely that's hit a Senegal player and gone to him. Surely that's what's happened. It might even be handball. It turns out, actually, as I say, when you had a second look, I couldn't believe what I was watching. I was like, what? So the Ecuador player didn't expect the ball to be coming towards them. It hits them, bounces towards Koulibaly, and he scores. It's absolutely crazy, that kind of defending to see from this team. It's been renowned as one of the best defending teams in this tournament. Crazy. And the scenes at the end, I was a bit disappointed because I couldn't actually watch it live, because I was busy. Literally, I started working 2 minutes before the end of the game, so it was really frustrating. But Senegal obviously overjoyed to qualify, and I believe that it's deserved. They are the best African team. They won the last Africa Cup of Nations, and I think they could go far. I'm not banking against this Senegal team causing an upset, put it that way, against England. They could. They absolutely could. They're a good team. They've got so much quality going forward for a... I need to be careful what I say here. I say for an African team, there hasn't been an African team, I think, stacked with this much talent, I think, ever. That Ghana team that made the quarterfinals against and almost made the semi-finals in 2010, I don't think was as stacked as this. I think, but if you look at this team, there's Premier League quality all over the place. You got Idrissa Gueye, who actually is suspended for the England game, which is a big miss for them. That's a really big miss. Then you've got Sarr, you've got, I'm trying to think who else they've got. Obviously, we talked about Koulibaly, they've got Mendy in goal. There's quite a few good Premier League players in there, and players that play at the top level of the game. And that, it could, I mean, this is probably their moment, if you think about it, because a lot of those players, Koulibaly and Idrissa Gueye especially, I think they're both fairly old. I know that Koulibaly's like in his 30s. So it'll be really interesting to see if they do it this time, because next World Cup will probably be coming too late for that lot, I think. But I've got to congratulate them. Getting out of the group stage for any African team is an achievement. And it's starting to happen a bit more regularly now, which is great. I really hope that if they beat England, which I hope they don't, but if they beat England, then I want them to go really far. The problem is that the next game after England will most likely be France. And I don't think anyone's getting past France from that part of the draw. I think France are going through in that game. So that is the group stage for Group A and Group B finished. England are playing Senegal on Sunday night. USA are playing the Netherlands on Saturday afternoon, and it's a big, it's a big win for Senegal. That one, it probably validates a lot of the good work that's been going on since just before the Africa Cup of Nations and since, and they're very good team to watch as well, actually. So I'm really looking forward to watching this England-Senegal game especially. Okay, so tomorrow's fixtures look like this then. We start with Australia, Denmark and Tunisia, France at 3 o'clock. I say tomorrow, today. Today's fixtures are Australia, Denmark and Tunisia, France. And then in the evening, we've got Poland, Argentina and Saudi Arabia against Mexico. So the France are through. We know this. France are through. They've already qualified and they're pretty much, with their goal difference, they've pretty much won the group as well. They would have to have a goal difference swing of 6 between them and Australia. For them, it would actually have to be 7 because the head-to-head's obviously in France's favour. For them to miss out on finishing first, even if they lost to Tunisia. So basically, the ramifications are: if Australia win, they finish second against Denmark. I'm backing Denmark to win. Which means it comes down to who can get the better result between Denmark and Tunisia. If Denmark win, Tunisia have to better that result, whatever that is. If they do that, then Tunisia go through. If Denmark do that, if Denmark win, and then Tunisia don't win, or they win by less goals, then Denmark go through. If Denmark and Australia draw, then Australia will go through, unless Tunisia win against France. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, Tunisia have got a really tough task now. They've got to beat this France team to stand any chance of qualifying, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think you'll find a scenario by half-time, France will be 1 or 2 up, and or at some point during the game, France will be 1 or 2 up, and that'll be game over for Tunisia. Australia against Denmark will then become the kind of knockout match in this group, and as I say, I'm expecting Denmark to win, but Australia are a good team, so we'll see. I think Denmark's previous experience in major tournaments and how good they've played. To be fair, if I think about the 2 games they've played, Tunisia they drew 0-0, and France they only just lost that game 2-1. They're a good team, and I think they should prove it in this game against Australia. And then looking forward to the evening's games. Poland, Argentina is the first game, and also the same time we've got Saudi Arabia against Mexico. Now this is a really close group because you got Poland on top on 4 points, 2 goal difference. Then Argentina second, 3 points, plus 1 goal difference. Saudi Arabia third, 3 points, minus 1 goal difference. And then Mexico fourth, 1 point, minus 2 goal difference. I do think that Saudi Arabia should beat Mexico. They should do. Based on them beating Argentina way back. That feels like ages ago now with that shock win for Saudi Arabia. To think that Saudi Arabia might win that game and still not go through is a bit of a travesty, really. But this Poland-Argentina game, it is kind of strange because depending on how it goes, if Poland win and win by a lot, which I don't think is likely, then Argentina could go out regardless. In fact, I think if Argentina... Wait. Yeah, if Argentina lose, they're out. It actually doesn't matter because the other result will guarantee someone on 4 points at least. Which means that if Argentina lose, they're out. If they draw, then it comes down to whether Saudi Arabia or Mexico can win. In fact, if Saudi Arabia can win, really, because Mexico probably couldn't overhaul that goal difference, the three goal difference there. So Argentina looking for at least a draw. I would expect Poland to be stubborn in defence and be clinical going forward, just like they were in their last game against Saudi Arabia. I think they are a good team, and I would back them to qualify from this group to get at least a point. I think Argentina have got a really tough task here. I think this is the hardest game. I know they lost to Saudi Arabia, but this is the hardest game they've got in this group. And given that if they finish second, they're playing France, that's it's not ideal. It's not an ideal World Cup, this, for Argentina. I think the threat of Lewandowski as well. I've got Zielinski as well, and they've got quite a few really good players in that Poland team. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Definitely the more interesting group of the two, got to say, because the France group just feels like France will just run away with it, and Australia and Denmark is the big match in that group. So those are all the games happening today, and that's going to be it from me. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this video, then please hit the like button, and if you want to be reminded of when I next upload a video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell button next to it to make sure that you get notified every time I post up a video. And who do you think will win out of England and Senegal in the last 16? That's what I want to hear from you in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.